If you embarrass me in this hotel,
I'm not embarrassing you.
Just
It's just that I don't feel comfortable.
Honey, don't have a fight with me in the
It's
hall.
not nice.
Please, I'm not going to do anything. I swear, my children. Please.
Disturbing audio released by The New Yorker this week. Movie mogul Harvey Weinstein accused of sexual misconduct. Hollywood's leading women are just some of those who've come forward. It's one of the most open secrets in Hollywood, but the deeply entrenched problem of sexual harassment in their workplace and the private lives of women is no secret anymore. Today, we look at the insidious nature of sexual sin, from the workplace to sex addiction and the sex trade. What can be done? What can we learn? I'm Lorna Dueck, and this is Context.
What's helped me very much as I have navigated my personal journey through the industry is staying true to myself.
Sheldon Neal speaks with Canadian actress Anne Purview about the frequent sexual risks she faces in making movies.
My story starts off, I was conceived in adultery. So I get this sex addiction stuff almost at a DNA level.
A doctor who has shared his story with Oprah, and Dr. Phil speaks about recovery from his own sex addiction, how he helps others overcome the same problem. Coming up.
But as a woman, should I wear this dress, that dress, these heels, those heels, more makeup, less makeup? How about my hair? There's so much put into attractiveness as a currency.
And therapist Sharon Ramsey on the wounds and trauma from sexual misconduct forced on women and girls. Sheldon Neal has that story.
Sexual assault, it takes something from you.
On My Snapshot this week, we're giving voice to the often voiceless, a former sex trade worker who found solace in God. Molly Thomas has the courageous profile on Beatrice Littlechief and her story after a life in sexual slavery. We begin today with Hollywood insider Dan Ruppel of Master Media. Dan is also a former producer of The Late Show with David Letterman. Dan, what are the lessons we are learning from this latest sexual scandal coming from Hollywood power brokers?
Well, Lorna, I think first and foremost, we have to realize that this problem, this sexual harassment, sexual leveraging, assault, is not specific only to the media world, of course. It permeates and destroys all institutions, all communities, all neighborhoods, all families, and individual lives. So we know it's not specific to the media. What makes it more relevant, though, and pronounced in the media is because many times the content, the storylines, the subtext, the ideologies that are permeating from some of the films, some of the television programs, reinforces these kinds of worldviews where if it feels good, do it. There's no absolute truth. Materialism, sexual conquest at all costs.
Okay, so now that it's out in all its ugliness, what are the support systems in Hollywood for people feeling assaulted and abused under power structures like that?
Well, within the Christian community, which is my community, there are support groups. There's, of course, their local church group, and their personal support of just fellow believers in the industry that they're meeting with. The main thing is to come out and don't keep it in the closet. Don't keep it a secret sin or a secret issue that has happened to them.
Okay.
They need to bring it out into the light, and that's when God can bring us healing, and that's when justice can prevail, and the sin can be uncovered.
When there is so much in an industry based on how a person is accepted or not, what spiritual advice do you have for navigating that?
That's a very, very good question. It's an important question. I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of primarily college students or young people who are aspiring to go into the industry. And one of the first things I tell them is number one, make sure your identity is solely found in Jesus Christ. Very often for a young actress, a young actor, They enter Hollywood and their identity, their self-worth, their value is solely wrapped up in their career. And this is a career, as you know, Lorna, that you're going to get 99 no's for every one yes. It's continual rejection, rejection, rejection. And if your identity is in that career or what you're aspiring to do, you're going to be devastated because you're going to feel you are rejected as a person. Everything about me, they rejected. Whereas if your identity is secure in Christ, you know you are loved no matter what happens. You are loved by your Creator, and you are walking in that relationship with Christ. If someone says no to you, you say, that's okay. I'm still valuable. I'm still exactly who God created me to be. And I wasn't right for that particular role. And I'll get the next one.
Okay, Dan Ripple. Okay, we're going to have to let you go at that. I'm glad you're there in Hollywood. Master Media's Dan Ripple, producer, writer, background. Thank you for being part of shining that light into Hollywood.
You're very welcome. Pleasure to be with you.
Me Too was the hashtag that picked up all voices when Hollywood stars began their complaints of sexual harassment. Others had tried, and while it went viral, history came back from Anita Hill and the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas in the 90s to court charges against Bill Cosby, and then President Trump's locker talk that went unpunished. Well, today it seems sexual harassment is facing new determination of zero tolerance. For Hollywood newcomers, this is a tough field to navigate. Here's Sheldon Neal.
As a rising actress, what are your thoughts on the developing story surrounding Harvey Weinstein?
It's honestly been a really sad journey and a sad realization, but you know, I've had a lot of people that have asked me if I'm surprised, and unfortunately I'm not surprised. And he's had a reputation. He's just a guy in power. And so when you have power, it's easy to abuse, you know. So it doesn't surprise me that he's found himself in this situation. It's sad to follow and watch it unfold. For many years, he's kind of been considered in the industry as someone that's a bit untouchable, right? As you can tell, like, a lot of people knew of his behavior, and unfortunately, you know, there's not that much you can do. I think the only person that you can really control in life is yourself. And I've, as an actor, encountered some Harvey Weinsteins in my day. Truly, I have, both on the management level and on the production side. And that's why I'm not surprised. But at the same time, I always like to think that, again, it comes back to you and how you choose to conduct yourself in those situations.
How do you hold on to your values in the process?
As an actor, your job is to be vulnerable. Your job is to be open, your job is to be malleable. And so that is the work, you know, it's the art form of life, acting. And so I think that it would be naive to say that you don't feel pressures. What's helped me very much as I have navigated my personal journey through the industry is staying true to myself. I have very strong family values. You don't need to sell yourself and what you stand for in order to be successful in this industry. I promise you that. You really don't. However, is that the path of least resistance sometimes to a lot of money and a lot of fame? Yes. Yes. And so you have to choose that for yourself.
Will this change?
I don't think it will ever go away. I hope that we will become more educated in how to handle it. I hope that with, more equality in terms of pay for women, and with more women producers, and with studio heads, hopefully some female energy in those kinds of power positions will certainly add a bit more of a different perspective to it. I think that what we can do right now, thinking about big picture, is educating our young girls and boys as to what is right and what is wrong, what is proper conduct and what is not, and start there, and start small, and lead by example. You know, I honestly always believe that it starts with you.
Why does this happen in the film industry? Why is the notion out there that this is just how it is?
Honestly, it's the vulnerability of an actor, the openness of an actor, the malleability. In my opinion, you know, the job itself is to give of yourself. The job, it's a very service kind of environment when you do it for the right reasons. There are a lot of people that are very successful and don't open up quite as much, don't give quite as much of themselves, and I think those people sometimes don't delve as deeply into the art form. But the art form itself is the art form of life, and so anybody can be an actor. That's the thing that's very tricky. So when you are paid for your personality, when you are paid to bring yourself into a project. It's very easy to take things incredibly personally, whether it's criticism, whether it's abuse, whether it's, it's very difficult to separate yourself sometimes from the experiences that you're having on a daily basis within the industry, right? It's very easy to blur the line between what's personal and what's business. But that's why I think it's essential to see yourself at all times as an actor, as the CEO of your own company. You are a business, and that's the way that you create longevity for yourself down the line. Being able to separate the personal from the professional. And what I think is vital, and that doesn't really get taught in school very much, is how to do that. How to know the difference between, personal lines and professional lines.
Had a spiritual awakening, which was fantastic, but sex addiction stayed in my life. Went to Bible school, sex addiction stayed in my life. Crying out to get better, and I couldn't. After that, I went to get my master's degree, started getting accountable to my roommate, and started to get free from sexual addiction and began to really integrate the principles of recovery in my own life. Now, the first time I went to
Well, not too long ago, addressing sex addiction was taboo even to mention. But Dr. Doug Weiss has made a career of it. He's a sex addiction therapist and former sex addict himself. Dr. Weiss, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lorna.
So let's start with the tragic. How did sexual addiction occur in your life?
Well, I was conceived in adultery. I was abandoned in foster homes, medicated through alcohol, drugs, and pornography. And that started a sexual addiction that involved other people. And then I got radically saved, but sex addiction stayed. And it wasn't until you heard the tape, got accountable, start working that. I've been free now for 30 years. Jesus can set you free your entire life. But there are some principles you need to know to be able to get that done.
Okay, let's talk about that. Is it difficult to treat sex addiction? And what are those principles?
You have to want to get better. You have to be willing to get accountability. You have to be willing to be honest. And if you're willing to do that now, there's 6 different types of sex addicts. If you can find out what type you are early, you can start working through the process. Like, we have people fly in from all over to Colorado Springs, and we get this done. We have phone counseling, phone groups. You're going to need a team to get it done, but you can get it done.
Wow. It sounds like transparency is the beginning of this. Is that right?
Well, you can't get healed of anything you won't be honest about. Okay? If we confess our faults one to another, we can be healed. If we keep our secrets to ourselves, we're guaranteed to stay sick. So that's where a lot of guys and gals get stuck, is that they don't think that if they tell somebody, it's going to help. It'll help tremendously if they tell somebody.
What is God's bottom line about sexual health? What's the basic navigating rule?
He wants us to have the best sex possible with our spouse. Eyes open, lights on, nurturing conversation. He wants both people in marriage to protect sexuality. That's his ideal. Okay, the world defiles that through pornography, cheap sex, sex with others, and breaking the rules. God's heart is we'd have the best sex possible. He's not against sex. He's for the best. And if we follow his guidelines and keep it inside of marriage with emotional and spiritual intimacy, with sexuality, we can have an amazing sex life. And he wants us to protect it. And if we fall, he's paid the price to redeem us. But we are going to have to do some healing if we've damaged ourselves sexually, or if we've been raped, abused, or abandoned.
All right. Dr. Doug Weiss, you have just opened up a big topic for us. Thank you so much. Author, speaker, licensed psychologist from Heart to Heart Counseling. You joined us from Colorado Springs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still ahead, The Hollywood Reporter's Canadian bureau chief on the Weinstein sex scandal. And Beatrice Littlechief sits down with Molly Thomas in Molly's hometown of Regina to talk about her miraculous freedom from the world of the sex trade. That's still to come.
Is climate change more evident than it's ever been? Coming soon, climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe joins our discussion on Mother Nature's beauty and wrath.
Well, what role does the media play in a sexualized stardom? Eitan Blessing from The Hollywood Reporter joins us now. Eitan, you have just returned from an industry gathering in Cannes where you say talk was of little else but Harvey Weinstein. What did you hear?
Because over the years, I and so many others in the industry had actually known about him. At the same time, we didn't know the actual scale of exactly what had happened. We didn't know the scope.
Well, why was it unaddressed for so long?
In Hollywood, they were very happy to be making money with him. And if along the way, these people had heard that when it came to all these actually young women, these young actresses, his behavior was not very good, then that was actually something that was okay with them, as long as his films continued to make a lot of money.
Well, then why do you think the Hollywood and mainstream press has avoided other scandals after all this time?
Whenever you would say anything, whether it be someone like me and I had heard something and I would put it in any of my articles, there's a very strong likelihood that Harvey Weinstein would spend in order to take me to court, to sue me, and at the end of the day, to scare me.
Wow. The power of a Hollywood mogul now taken down. Well, let's hope things do change in Tinseltown. Thank you, Eitan. That was Eitan Blessing, Canadian Bureau Chief of The Hollywood Reporter. Well, Hollywood has long given us images of ordinary people dancing through their dreams in idyllic settings. To find out that sexual assault underlies too much of that culture is something that's common across many workplaces. Here's Sheldon Neal.
What are your thoughts surrounding the Harvey Weinstein ongoing storyline, especially as we focus on the issue of sexual harassment?
Well, I think probably the chief thing is that sexual harassment is not located specifically with celebrities. I think it happens frequently in a variety of settings to normal people, to everyday folk all around the world, really. So I think it maybe just highlights that this is an ongoing phenomenon that men and women face.
Why does sexual harassment happen?
I think there can be proximity. So the fact that you're working with someone in the same environment day in and day out, we probably spend more time with our work colleagues than we do with our loved ones and families day to day. I think there can be a misinterpretation of cues or an expectation that, oh, because I'm feeling this way, you will naturally reciprocate. I think in more drastic situations, it's intentional. It's a way for someone who has power to use their power and get what they want. And then I think it may also be a confusion around consent, someone's right to say no. If I want something doesn't mean that you have to agree. It just means that I want something. So I do think there are those kinds of factors that influence the prevalence of sexual harassment.
Why does sexual harassment happen in the workplace? What is the difference between those two environments?
So I think in the workplace, and I would say across all workplaces, if I can be that broad, I think there's proximity. You're with the same people day in and day out. There is access. It's not like going to a movie where you're sitting next to a stranger and it'd be kind of weird to have a stranger all of a sudden lean over to you. In a workplace, you've already developed kind of a relationship, and from that place, I think it can be easy to overstep, to take advantage of that kind of proximity. And again, people are there, they're there to work, so they're going to be here tomorrow. They're going to be here next week. And I think that just those ideas, those confusions around boundaries, around entitlement, around power, give greater rise to things happening in the workplace.
What legal support is available to victims of sexual harassment when it takes place first in the workplace and when it takes place outside of the workplace?
There is legislation in Ontario specifically around workplace safety and against harassment in whatever form it may take. So there's that provision, but I think more importantly, the employer needs to take the lead to create an environment where the workplace is safe, not just physically, but emotionally and certainly sexually. So the employee would need to be asking to ensure that there are policies in place, but more importantly, the employer should be taking the first step and saying, this is the kind of workplace we want to have. This is what's expected, this is what's not tolerated, this is how we deal with things. So that's the workplace. Outside of, sadly, there's no law against being a jerk, which is a problem, and maybe we'd all be in trouble. So for the employee who's experienced something, they first and foremost need to acknowledge that it's happened to them and find a safe spot. So that could be a coworker, that could be someone outside the workplace, that could be for more formal proceedings. There are avenues, but first of all, you have to acknowledge that something has happened and then be willing to take action that makes sense for you.
Why do people commit sexual harassment?
I don't know if everyone thinks of their actions in terms of how another person might perceive it. So if I think back to situations where people say, well, I was just making a joke. And I think, wow, is that really funny? Like, where else have you been able to make those kinds of jokes? And that just gets blown over. I think that sexual harassment happens out of a sense of entitlement. I can say what I want, and if you're too sensitive, whatever. I think we live in a culture where apologies are very conditional. The classic, if anyone was offended by what I may or may not have said, I apologize. That's not an apology, right? An apology is, I understand that I have hurt you, and I will do better. So I think harassment happens in those situations where you can blow it off as stupid, you can blow it off as that's not what I intended, you can blow it off, you're too sensitive, but there's not actually an accountability for having said things, done things over and over and over again. And harassment can also continue in situations where there is silence. So we all know this goes on, so we'll just warn you and maybe you can take care. Again, victim is being made responsible for avoiding alleged perpetrator, as opposed to we all do not engage in these behaviors. You will be called out. If you need help, we'll help you find help, but it's not okay. Where are those messages?
Next, the most dramatic of recovery from sexual crime. Beatrice Little Chief takes us to the power of God when sex assault has occurred.
Is climate change more evident than it's ever been? Coming soon, climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe joins our discussion on Mother Nature's beauty and wrath.
As we wrap up today's program, when sex and abuse of power is left unchecked, it can lead to the worst of victimization. Molly Thomas takes us to that journey.
You know, I couldn't believe I moved a block away from where so much of my trauma started. If I go back to being adopted at 5 into a white community and being the only Indigenous person at that time in that community, a lot of racism, even if it wasn't meant to be, it was there. Being called like a wagon burner or, you know, a squaw, something that was said to cause shame to me. I was told I was part white. I don't know who my father is, so I'm not sure about that. But, you know, not being able to fit into either community was hard. So opening the door and seeing smoke and darkness, and you can feel the darkness and you can feel the evil and the cackling laugh and, you know, what the dirtiness and just, you know, them using intravenous drugs and, you know, not even knowing what they're doing. And then within the hour, you know, being shot up by those drugs. And a couple hours later being, you know, raped by 2 guys. If I was ever innocent, my innocence was lost then. Growing up, one thing that I started learning was I didn't know what was wrong with me, but there was something wrong with me. Just from being fed, you know, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're dumb. People are allowed to hurt you. Men are allowed to abuse you.
Beatrice, give me an idea of how sexual assault maybe scars differently than physical.
When I was physically assaulted, I'd be bruised, you know, and then they'd go away. But sexual assault, it takes something from you. It takes it brings so much shame. You know, as I heal through all of what I've gone through in my life, the sexual abuse is the hardest to get through because you don't understand why, why. Like my whole entire life just like really quickly started flashing before my eyes, and that's when I thought, like, right now I look at it and it is by the grace of God that I'm still here.
How do you look at God?
When you are so damaged and so broken, and people in the church are saying, just raise your hands and believe in this man that loves you and died on the cross, you're like, bull, as if he died. Where was he? You have all those questions. Where was he when all these things are going on? Not only with me, but with my kids. Where was he, with my mother, that had to give me up? Where was he?
What answers did you hear?
And I had a green Bible, and so I wrote a question down, and I was like, who are you? I was praying, and I opened my Bible, and it said Jesus Christ. And I kept asking questions, and he would answer, I love you. I had this conversation on a piece of paper and the Bible, and
just by flipping it open?
Yeah, just by flipping it open and pointing by faith. He showed me, I am God. I died for you. My healing journey's been ongoing, and it's me and God. He's my counselor. I've tried to talk to humans, and sometimes it's overwhelming when I share just a little bit. They're like really hard to like give me the answers that I need. So I'm like, that's okay then. I've gone to counselors and I've ended up starting counseling them. You know what I mean? Not intentionally. It's just like they're so broken, and I see people's brokenness. About 6 years ago, I said, you can use me however you see fit. You can use my brokenness. If it's going to bring people to you, because I'm really, really angry at you. I know you're there, but it doesn't mean I'm not angry at you. And if you can still love me and be there, I'll be there for you, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. And I've stuck to that.
Well, on the backdrop of Hollywood's assault mistakes, that's the reality of recovery from sexual sin. It's possible. Lots more on our website. Thank you for joining us all. Thank you to Beatrice and Molly for that close. I'm Lorna Duick, and you're watching Context.
Voters turning their outrage into online worldwide trends.
When it comes to race and religion, what do we need to know?
We'll never arrest our way out of this problem.
I guess the politics ahead of the people on the front lines is more concerning.
Of course, it's too dangerous for us to go over to Syria right now.
This is real, isn't it? Well, this is an issue our next guest is an expert on.
I think it's going to be very difficult for the province to follow these rules.
What is the standard that the church asks?
And he said, God's got you. You are protected.
There's light, there must be dark.
It takes us right back to Black Lives Matter, and yes, they do.
What you're talking about here really is the treatment of women in media and entertainment industries.
Bad behavior, is it out of control?
God's not a rain god, that he just does what we ask him to do.